So we're back out in the field today for episode 3 of the 2026 Big Picture Ag Read Your Crop Story series. You can see the crop's getting some size on it here. We're moving through that rapid growth phase really quickly, and there's a lot of things starting to show up in our fields. I've been across part of my territory a little bit the last week or so, and it really is the tale of the twos world. And some of you have heard me talk about the twos affecting our crop: too wet, too dry, too hot, too cold. And right now we're talking about the story of the twos with rainfall. You know, there's a lot of parts of the area that have had big rains, too much rains, anywhere from 4 inches in one shot to 10 or 12 inches over the last month. And that's really challenging some of our crops. I went to Iowa last week, and I was in an area where they're not getting very much rain. They've been marginal on rainfall. They feel like they're getting dry. The challenge is when we really started looking at these crops, and when I was there mid last week, it was getting up into the 90s a couple of days, some of the crop was starting to show stress. The corn was really rolling. And granted, the heat was a little bit of a factor, but what we really discovered when we started looking in those fields, it wasn't that they're out of moisture at all. It's more there's challenges with the compaction around those roots and around those plants that are keeping those roots from extending as fully and as fast as they'd like to. So things like that, those are signs we've got to be paying attention to. So if you're seeing parts of your field starting to stress, maybe it's time to go out and take a look and look underneath the surface to see what kind of things we've got going on there. You know, it's also that time of the year with the crop size that there's a lot of things we can do. I'm going to show you one of those examples in the video here yet today. But start watching for brace roots. Look, try to figure out if you've got brace roots happening. Was it a weather event that caused it? Or are there some other things going on within our system that maybe we could take a look at? Watch your tillers. If you've got tillers growing in your field, when does your plant start to slough those off? That's another big key that we look for when that plant is not getting everything it could use. And maybe we can look at next year where we might be looking to do something for our crop. So if you aren't in the habit of taking a shovel or a potato fork to the field with you, I really encourage you to do that and start digging up your plants. There's so much that we can learn from the processes that we do. It's not a difficult thing at all. You just take the fork, work it down into the root system, give it a few pries. I do like to work my way around the root ball a little bit with the fork or the spade. So the first thing we do is, as we get our way worked around the plant, when we start pulling it up, we do want to make sure we kind of pay attention to how easily the spade or the fork goes into the ground. Also, we want to see what kind of root system, how much pulling and crackling we hear when we pull it up. I don't know if you can hear that through the microphone or not, but there was a pretty substantial amount of roots there that came popping loose. So I have pulled the plant out here in the open so you can see it a little bit better, just the rest of the things that we do. But we initially turn it up and just kind of look at what kind of root extension we've got coming out of the bottom of the chunk we dug out. And there's a couple of ways. You can either just kind of pound it on the ground a little bit, work your way around and try to knock the soil off. That's certainly the easy way to do it in the field. And you try to get most of it pretty well knocked off. At this point with this one, we're starting to get pretty good vision of what we've got going on. And of course, you can always take them to the house and soak them in some water and rinse them. That gives you an even better idea of what you've got going on. Once you've got most of the dirt knocked off of it, I like to come up a couple of nodes above the base of the plant and just go ahead and cut that plant off. What we're going to do is, as we get this stalk opened up, we're going to just look at the condition of the stalk inside. look at, the brightness of the pith, how this stalk health looks in general. Next step you want to do, though, is take your knife and carefully work your way down through the stalk, through the center of it. Work your way down just about to the crown. And when you get near the bottom, you can just separate that, and that stalk will just break right apart. And it'll open up, and you can start to look at it. And once we get this plant dissected to this level, we can really start looking at a lot of things. There are a lot of different things that we look at within Genesis Ag to determine how our plants are doing. One of the things we really like to do, if we can, and it depends on how well the soil comes off, but we want to check what our planting depth was. And not just the planting depth, but digging down, and actually on this one, if right there is the seed on this one, but you can check then, not just really kind of, what was your plant, not what did you think you were planting, but what was your actual effective planting depth. You can see on this particular plant that, if we go from the top of the seed there, soil level was right here. That's a good solid 2 inches. We've been in a few fields this year that we've seen that, guys thought they were at 2 or 2.25 inches. And sometimes by the time things settle into place, they're not quite that deep. So looking at things like this are important. Some of the other things we look at is what's the color of the pith of the stalk. You can use this through the season and check for your health in your stalk. Last year, there was quite a bit of different stalk rots that occurred. You'll see that within the stalk if you'll split it earlier in the season. And there are a few other tips that we like to look at when we split that stalk open that help tell us how that plant is doing. But you can look at the color of the roots as they've split open. You can look at how good is your root development and a lot of different things. And if you'd like to learn more about some of the other things that we look at, the things that we watch through the season when we're digging plants and splitting stalks, please reach out. A lot of great information here in the field that occurs under the ground or inside of the plant that we often don't take time to look at. So we're out here in our field today where we've got one of the flag tests, and this particular field is right at 1,000 GDDs. We're about 57 days into the growing season from planting. You can see we put the zip tie here. This one is on the 6th leaf. And the reason for that is here's number 5, here's number 4 already on the ground. So 3, 2, and 1 are rapidly disappearing. But if we start at this point, we can see we've got V6, 7, 8, 9, 10 is back here, 11, and number 12, the collar is just starting to show. So we're at V12, and as you can see, it would be pretty easy to misjudge where our plant growth is if we didn't have that zip tie on this plant. There are a few things we can do throughout the season as our plants grow. We know that things change within the plant with environmental conditions and other things that affect it. But many of us are familiar with things we can do through the season, like pulling leaves and running a tissue sample or a sap sample, whatever your preference might be there. See if there are gaps in what our plant is accessing for nutrients, and if there are things we can address with that. But the other component sometimes we don't think about is pulling a soil sample in conjunction with that. In the past, we used to think that those numbers were pretty static, but a lot of folks now are saying that that may not be the case. So a simple thing that I do is I pull my samples in a very concentrated area. A lot of times what I'll do is mark a spot in my field, and I'll pull a soil probe from next to the plant and pull the leaf that I need to pull from that plant right next to it, and then just move over a couple rows or 3 or 4 or 5, whatever your spacing you think needs to be, and go back to that same area each time through the season. If you're doing multiples of these, try to maintain the consistency of where you're sampling to take that variability out of it. There's a story going on out here in your crop every day at this point in the season. While I don't expect you to be in your field every day, you should be in it regularly. There are things we can learn from this crop that might help us do some things better next year and keep moving up that yield ladder. So with that, we're going to put a wrap on today's session of the Big Picture Ag Read Your Crop Stories series, but would invite you, if you would like to better understand the story your crop might be telling you, reach out. I'd love to share with you some of the things that we look at. If you want, we can arrange maybe even for me to come by and get out in the field with you and start looking at those things together. Reach out to me on my email, which is bigpictureag@gmail.com. Follow us on our Facebook page, which is Big Picture Ag in the group section, and also like and follow our YouTube channel here too. So with that, we'll look forward to seeing you again in 2 weeks. This crop's going to be moving along very quickly. We won't be very far away from pollination, probably the next time we get together.